Welcome to The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge. We're applying the mind of Christ to the matters of the day so that you can connect the eternal with the everyday and get ready to head out into the world that God so loves in ways that honor Jesus. So let's get started. This is The Reconnect.
Encouraging you to live as an ambassador of God's kingdom in the world. This is The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge on Faith Radio.
If we're gonna fly, we fly like eagles, arms out wide. If we're gonna fear, we fear no evil. We will rise. By your power we will go. By your spirit we are bold. If we're gonna stand, we stand as giants. If we're gonna walk, we walk as lions.
Hello, my friend. I'm Carmen LaBerge. You're listening to The Reconnect. Going to be looking for high participation today on the text line. So if you've never texted, today's a great day to do that. 877-933-2484. If we're already in your phone, then get ready because today's a day for you and I to engage each other. So love for you to just participate throughout the conversation today on the text line. That would be great. So when's the last time you ate at a restaurant where they gave you a fortune cookie at the end of the meal? So me, yesterday. We don't eat out very often. We certainly don't eat out at this particular restaurant very often. And so I don't know why, but I had forgotten that they give you a fortune cookie at the end of the meal. And so if someone were to ask me, when's the last time you ate at a restaurant where they gave you a fortune cookie at the end of the meal? My answer would be yesterday. How about you? So the fortune cookie, by the way, looked and cracked and tasted exactly like a fortune cookie should. I think that the recipe for the fortune cookie is something that should not be messed with, and this particular restaurant hasn't messed with it. The cookie looked cracked, tasted exactly like a fortune cookie is supposed to. But then there was the little slip of paper, and it couldn't have been more different. It was not all that I have come to expect inside of a fortune cookie. I don't mind telling you. First, it was printed on one side in full color. I remember them just being plain white strips of paper with plain black letters. No, this one on one side, full color, artwork with a QR code to scan, which I did not scan, but there it was, full color art with a QR code. I have no idea where that would lead you because I didn't go. On the other side, which was white, there were black letters and then numbers. Lucky numbers to be used in, yes, gambling away your money at the lottery. With, printed beneath the numbers, in really tiny letters, a disclaimer that there's no guarantee implied that the numbers printed were in any way connected to any game of chance that you might choose to play, leaving very little room for the so-called fortune itself. Now, do you remember when the fortune inside of a fortune cookie used to read like a proverb? Remember when the fortune cookie would sound, well, proverbial? Spoiler alert, they do not anymore. I did a little research and come to find out, I'm not wrong. The content in the fortune cookie has changed. Decades ago, the messages that were printed and baked into fortune cookies were actual verses from the book of Proverbs. They sounded proverbial because they were. Yes, other fortune cookies included traditional Chinese proverbs. There were sayings from various wisdom literature in the Bible, but also Confucius or Aesop's fables or other authors of Eastern philosophy. And then came the generation of horoscopes. So prior to the 1960s, there were all of these literally proverbial statements in fortune cookies. And then, starting in the late 50s, but apparently fully flourishing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, fortune cookies shifted from fortunes that offered general wisdom to direct personal predictions. These are probably the fortune cookies you remember. Sets of numbers then began appearing on the reverse side of the slip because, well, the lottery. And then, in the past 25 years, another shift has taken place. Why? Well, at one level, to avoid legal liability and mounting complaints because the fortune inside the cookie apparently wasn't coming true. And so the cookie then became a place of generalized positive affirmation or tongue-in-cheek jokes for like the meme culture. Things like, help, I'm trapped in a fortune cookie factory. It will not surprise you that you can order customized slips for marketing or personal announcements or even party favors. Yes, complete with QR codes for people to Venmo you money for your honeymoon after they have enjoyed your wedding reception or to celebrate your baby's birth or really, well, whatever. Why tell you all of this today? Well, because we're going to actually look at a proverb. Because there's actual wisdom literature that has not changed. And it's not baked in a cookie. It's found in the middle of the Bible. So today I'm going to invite you to crack open the book of Proverbs and taste and see that the Lord is good. So where in the Word are you today? We want to let God speak to us through that which He's already spoken, His living and eternal Word. Our Growing Your Faith verses of the day come from Proverbs 12, 25 and 26. Worry weighs a person down. An encouraging word cheers a person up. The godly give good advice to their friends. The wicked lead them astray. So what we have here in Proverbs 12, 25, and 26 are two distinct verses. Each is a classic example of antithetic parallelism. Aren't you glad I started with fortune cookies instead of antithetic or antithetical parallelism? So there's a poetic form here in Proverbs. It's beautifully exemplified in each of these verses. So this poetic form, antithetic or antithetical parallelism, very common in biblical wisdom literature, especially here in the central chapters of Proverbs. So you see it a lot. The moral truth that's highlighted in the verse centers on juxtaposing two characters, one wise, one foolish, one good, one wicked, one righteous, one sinful. Or in the case of Proverbs 12:25, the weight of worry on a person versus the uplifting of an encouraging word. So in verse 25, the antithetic parallel is not of two people unless the two people are the encourager and the discourager, or the discourager and the encourager. But it's really an internal antithesis here, a heavy heart versus a glad heart. So do you have a heavy heart today? Is weary weighing you down? Or do you have a glad heart today, having been encouraged by the word? Are you a person who weighs others down with worry? Are you a person with an encouraging word who cheers others up? So the internal antithesis, the heavy heart versus the glad heart, is also demonstrated or exemplified in how we behave toward others in terms of weighing them down with worry or encouraging them with a word of, with a word of encouragement. And then verse 26. Again, we're looking at this as an example of antithetic parallelism. This is a proverb in the wisdom literature of the Bible. The godly give good advice to their friends. The wicked lead their friends astray. So the internal antithesis here is the righteous versus the unrighteous path. Like, right? I'm going to be a godly person, and I'm going to give good advice to my friends. I am going to lead them in a path of righteousness, faithfulness, goodness, beauty, truth. Or, as a wicked person, I'm going to lead my friend astray. There are two kinds of people in the world, this proverb would acknowledge. This is actually something that Jesus talks about as well. Jesus amplifies this in the Sermon on the Mount. You could read it in Matthew chapter 7, where Jesus is talking about the two paths. But which kind of friend are you? A godly friend who gives good advice, or the wicked friend who leads your friends astray? Next up, we're going to look at John chapter 14 to see if we can find the way. You're listening to The Reconnect. Hello, my friend. I'm Carmen LaBerge. You're listening to The Reconnect. It's Monday, and so we are going to get into the Monday mailbag. And I have invited you to jump on the text line, 877-933-2484, except I can't see it. So Paul will have to let us know if there's something on the text line that we need to be paying attention to. So good morning, Paul.
Good morning. Well, at this point, Terry checking in, just saying fun and interesting kickoff for your show.
Nice. All right. Thanks, Terry. Appreciate that. All right. Well, I'm going to grab this question from an email that came in actually a couple of weeks ago. Carmen, I feel like I must be on the wrong path. I don't feel like I'm headed down a path that leads anywhere. How do I know if I'm on the right path, the way of Jesus, especially when I feel defeated or alone? Can that be right? So first of all, let me just affirm that our feelings are a terrible barometer of the truth. I am sure that if based on feelings alone, the Apostle Paul were to choose whether or not to proceed down the faithful path that Christ had called him to, I am sure that there would have been many times that his feelings would have led him in a different direction. So I do want to highlight the word feel. I feel like I must be on the wrong path. I don't feel like I'm headed down a path. I feel defeated or alone. A lot of feelings. And so I think that thinking about what you're feeling is like a look in the mirror kind of a thing. And whether or not you're going to let your feelings be your guide, or whether or not you're going to let the Holy Spirit be your guide. And you're not objectively alone. If you're in Christ, then you are not objectively alone. And this feeling of defeat, like, who is that? Like, that's literally the enemy, right? If you're feeling defeated and you have victory in Jesus, if you don't know, quote unquote, that you're on the right path, and yet you know that you're walking with Jesus, just because it's uncomfortable, difficult, uphill, full of rocks, twisty and turny, maybe there hasn't been a beautiful vista to that scenic, the thing when you're on a long road and there's like that scenic pull off. Maybe you haven't had one of those in a while. Doesn't mean you're on the wrong path, but maybe your awareness of the presence of Christ is something that I could encourage you with. Christ never leaves you and never forsakes you. If you are walking with Jesus, then he is with you. Like it's a withing experience. You are under, you are close enough to him that you're under his yoke. You are, your feet are next to his feet in such a way that literally the step he takes, you take the next step. So this feeling of being alone or defeated, I want to encourage you to take up and to consider that maybe that's the enemy. Maybe that's the enemy who is working on you and saying, God's not really present. God is really present. That's a lie. It's a lie of the enemy that you're alone. It's also a lie of the enemy that you've been defeated. It's not to say that there aren't times that the road's not hard. It is hard. Challenges are real for sure. But it doesn't mean you're on the wrong path just because the path is hard or narrow or difficult. So I want to look at John chapter 14 as a part of this conversation, but also a part of the larger conversation about what it says in Proverbs 12 that we just read a moment ago. Because in Matthew 7, Jesus uses these two roads as a metaphor for how people choose to live, and that was certainly what's in view in Proverbs 12, which we looked at, about whether or not the advice that our friends gives us leads us in the way we should go or leads us astray, which would mean in a way that we should not go. So there's a conversation in John chapter 14 Jesus knows what's ahead. Jesus knows he's headed to the cross. He has told the disciples that on a number of occasions, but they still don't quite get it. And he says, do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. And then he talks about the Father's house and that he's going to prepare a place for them and that he's then coming again and that he will take them to himself. That's a journey with Jesus all the way home to the Father's house. If you've ever wondered, like, what's that about? That is a journey with Jesus. It starts here and now. And it's moment by moment, all the way home, step by step, to the Father's house. So that's the journey with Jesus from here to there, from here to eternity. And Jesus says that is so that where he is, there you also will be. And he says, you know the way where I am going. And Thomas says, Lord, we don't know where you're going. How could we know the way? And that's when Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus is the way, and he's the way of life. Jesus is the truth. He's the truth of all eternity. And Jesus is the life, living in faith every day, step by step, moment by moment, all the way home to the Father's house. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus is not just the way, he's also the doorway, the gateway, the pathway. So my encouragement today to you, if you think you're on the wrong path, well, then immediately stop and turn around, repent, and get on the right path, the righteous path. That is the path of Christ, and it is the one that leads all the way home. And there are some times that it's narrow and difficult and uphill and full of rocks and a little bit lonely, but you're never alone. If you are on the way of Jesus, if you are walking in the way of Christ, then he is with you always, even to the end of the age. It is the promise that comes at the end of the Great Commission. And Jesus is never going back on his word. He can't. He is the Word made flesh, living among us full of grace and truth. Let's continue our conversation next. I'm Carmen LaBerge. You're listening to The Reconnect. It's Monday, so we are in the Monday mailbag. Sometimes we just need to have a conversation about faith itself. I mean, this is Faith Radio. We talk about faith a lot, talk about putting your faith in Jesus. What does that mean, and what does that look like? Maybe you'd just like to have a conversation with somebody about that to get some resources explaining like what faith in Jesus really is, what a relationship with Jesus could look like. If you want to explore more about who Jesus is, what he taught, what having a relationship with him could be like, I invite you to text the word faith to 41224. Again, you text the word faith to 41224. You're going to get a series of text messages over the next few weeks just exploring what it means to put your faith in Jesus, the promises he makes, who he is, and what a relationship with him can really look like. Okay, the text line is now working, or it's working where I am. It was always working. I just couldn't see it, and now I can. So there you go. Andrew, thank you for the little test message. And yes, that is really Paul. And thank you for the person in the 917 area code who texted the word reconnect. Appreciate that, right? Appreciate you guys checking in. Corey checking in. Kathy's checking in. Jessica's checking in. Hello, friends. Appreciate, Jessica says, I love the Monday mailbag. I do too. So here is something that, it doesn't even come in the form of a question. And it reminds me, of something that's in my social feed. And, I don't know how stuff gets there, except, right, we create these algorithms by what we like and watch and post and click and comment on or whatever. And so I now have this person in my feed whose name I don't know, and that's not really relevant, but I do appreciate what she does. And she just walks up to people or waits. She actually stands and waits. And as a person is walking past, if they catch her eye, like, right, she says, do you have a moment? And invariably people say yes, or at least, only the ones that certainly the ones that she posts, right? They say yes. And she says, can I just walk with you and have a conversation? Well, where do you want to go? Well, wherever you're going. Well, how long do you want to walk? Well, however long it takes to go where you're going. Well, what do you want to talk about? Well, whatever's on your mind, whatever you want to talk about. And she mics them up, and there's obviously a person with a camera that, is following them a few paces behind. And then also on her feed, she has a poster that is set up at like a chair and a table. And there's just some note cards and a pen, and then like a fishbowl kind of a thing. And the sign says, read a secret, share a secret. And so a person, it's a random individual, sees the poster board, sits down on a little stool, pulls a quote unquote secret out of the fishbowl and reads it out loud, and then is invited to say something to the person that wrote that secret, and then write one of their own. Well, this comment on the text line feels like one of those. A person texted, I'm not worth being helped. That is heartbreaking. And that's a lie. I don't know if I can convince you that that's a lie, but I'd like to try. Because you are worthy. You are worthy because you are created in the image of God. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. These are things the Bible says about you. These are things God says about you. God created you on purpose and for a purpose. And do you know what that purpose is? His glory. He created you so that he could love you. That's it. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to be anything. You just be you. You just be you. I want you to think for a moment about the expectations that we have when a little child comes out onto a stage. Okay? What do they expect? They expect us to be there and to be watching, right? And what do we expect? We just expect them to be them in all the fullness of who they are. We don't care if they keep their tape on the toes or if they sing the song the right way or if they do all the hand motions at the right time. We don't care. We don't care. Okay, so you are not worthy because of what you can do, and you are not unworthy because of what you have done. Your worth is based on the fact that the God of all creation is your Father. He's the author of your life. He knit you together in your mother's womb. You're fearfully and wonderfully made, and he knows you full well. You know how much worth you have? Do you know how God sees your worth? He sent his one and only Son from the glory of heaven and all the benefits of being the King of Kings. Not just to be a human, not just to condescend to human reality and to live in a time when there was no indoor plumbing, but to live as an enslaved person, as an Israelite under Roman occupation, to never get married, to never have his own kids, to never own a home, to never get an education. I mean, the kind we think of. To never write a book, the way we think of writing a book. Nope. But to die. For you. That's how much you're worth. You are worth every drop of blood in the person of Christ. The next time the enemy, the liar, the thief comes to steal your joy or leads you to imagine that you're not worth being helped, I hope you will consider that the only help you'll ever need is the help that has come in the person of Christ. And that he came for you because you're worth it. Because he wants to spend all eternity with you. Because he wants to be with you right now, and he's for you. He's singing over your life. He's watching from the audience as you, little child, come out onto the stage to do what? He doesn't care. Just to look for him. Just to find him looking at you. Just to recognize that he's closer to you than your next breath, and he's watching your every move, and he's counting the times that you turn over at night. That's how much you're worth. Don't believe for a second that you're not worth being helped. You're worth all the help that's come from heaven in the person of Christ. That's how valuable you are. That's how worthy you are, my friend. Daniel Bennett's going to join us next. We're going to bring the mind of Christ to bear on some of the headlines of this day. We're going to turn to a couple of political headlines. Maybe you have heard that there are some lawmakers who have been, away from the desk for some period of time. Do we have a right to, know where they are, what they're doing, what's wrong, when they'll be back? We're going to have that conversation next here on The Reconnect. Mitch McConnell has been in the Senate a really long time. 42 years, I think. 30 times he attended an event in Kansas at a place, or Kansas, I think it's Kentucky, called Fancy Farm. Yep, Fancy Farm, Kentucky, where there is a picnic, a barbecue picnic. It's been going on since 1880. So it was notable that Mitch McConnell has not been in his seat in the Senate for some period of time. It was really notable that he missed the picnic. Daniel Bennett is joining us. He's a professor of politics at John Brown University. Daniel, welcome back.
Good morning, Carmen.
Should we be worried that a senator is not in his seat, or a member of Congress not in their seat, doing their job, so to speak, or is that none of our business?
Well, I think we can approach it in a couple of different ways. You know, as human beings and people struggling with health issues, whether it's physical or mental health, certainly, let's say you were noting someone's absence from church, for example. Hey, what's wrong with Sarah? I have noticed that Sarah hasn't been here. Is she okay? Yeah, she's struggling with something, but she'll be back soon. Okay. That's kind of the end of the conversation for us, right? We're not supposed to, I don't think, be prodding and figuring out exactly what's going on if we're not particularly close to that person, or if the person doesn't really want us to know the depth of what the situation is for various reasons. I think it's a reasonable tack to take. But when we're talking about public servants, and we're talking about people who have, like with Senator McConnell, put himself out there in the public eye for over 4 decades and have asked the public to trust him with their vote, with his, to represent them well, and then to essentially back out or back off of that for the sake of what is probably real serious and real issues. It feels like that's cutting just one way, right? The public trust actually demands something higher of our elected officials than what we might afford to people that we know just in passing.
Okay, I like the way that you are sort of helping me think about different categories of people. I mean, without putting people in categories. So yeah. People with whom I have some kind of interaction, but may not know deeply personally. Because if there's somebody missing at church who I know well, I'm going to I am going to do more than just note their absence and ask after them and pray for them. I am going to reach out to them and see if I can serve them in a particular way during, whatever it is that's keeping them away from church.
Sure.
When you're thinking about a public servant who I feel like I know in some ways because I see them so often, I hear them, they want my vote. Like we have a relationship of sorts, but I don't know them, and I'm not privy, and I have no reason on a personal level to be privy to their personal health information, but they do work for me. Like there's this other layer of this, right? Where they do work for us and they have put themselves out there in the public in a way that's different than my average neighbor.
Sure. Yeah, and so I think, and this is where I think we can respect a person's privacy as an elected official while also expecting a certain degree of transparency. So hypothetically, right, Senator McConnell is certainly not well, right? You mentioned Fancy Farm. I lived in Kentucky for 2 years. I was just blown away by how important this basically state fair. I mean, it's not exactly a state fair. People in Kentucky will tell me, "Oh, we'll call in now and say that he's completely wrong about this," but it's a big deal, right, for him just not to be there for this. So something's not right with him at this moment. I think his office needs to be more transparent about this, right? So without getting into the nitty-gritty of his diagnosis or giving us daily medical updates, be transparent to say, we expect Senator McConnell to be back at this particular moment. He's going to be out for, as a sports fan, right? 6 to 8 weeks. He's out with a knee injury. He'll be out 6 to 8 weeks and we'll do an update after that. Right now, it opens a door for innuendo and conspiracy theories and other things that really don't serve the public well, but also doesn't serve his reputation as an elected official well. So we don't need to know everything about his medical situation, but just like we would expect, our public servants to be honest and transparent when we elect them, that goes for whether or not they're going to be physically present in their office as well.
Mm-hmm. I do feel like because his wife is also a public figure, and so I do feel like there might have been an opportunity for Elaine Chao at some point to ease our fears or, assuage our concerns. And I don't feel like she did that. So that's also challenging. Right. And I don't want to be critical. Right. There's this, no. There are all of those things wound up together. We certainly want to be praying for them both.
And I should clarify too, right? It's not just for medical issues that we expect a certain degree of transparency, or I guess, that we would want to trust our elected officials with a higher degree of, or that we expect a higher degree of transparency from them. It's in other areas of life too. So I think, I think the long lasting example from this in American politics is financial disclosures, right? Do you have any conflicts of interest? If the response is, well, that's private information, I'm not going to give that out. That's fine if I'm a private citizen and someone comes up to me and say, hey, show me your banking information. I'm going to say, no, thank you. I'm not going to do that. But when I'm running for public office, there has to be an expectation of being an open book to a degree that you do surrender some of that privacy for the sake of assuaging concerns from your constituents. So it's not just with medical information; it's with many areas of your life that would otherwise be off limits to an average or for an average person. But when you seek that level of power and authority in the service of serving others, then you do surrender some of that. And I feel like we as a society have, for a variety of reasons, kind of let some of that go in the name of political expediency. Notably, President Trump never released a lot of his financial information and said he would do it later after he wasn't under audit. And then when he was elected, he said, people don't really care about that, it turns out. And it's not just President Trump, right? But I'm saying we do expect as people and should expect a degree of transparency from our elected officials. And it's disappointing that seems to be going away.
All right. We have an observation on the text line. in quote marks, the word rehab. Everybody is saying that Mitch McConnell has been is coming home from rehab. Mitch McConnell discharged from rehab, will recover at home. Talk about the maybe the invitation here is for us to talk about the word rehab. And so as you're listening right now, the word rehab is one of those words that has the meaning of it has morphed over time. Originally, the word rehab was used to talk about the restoration of soldiers injured in war. They were rehabilitated in what then just got reduced to rehab. It then expanded to include medical rehabilitation, which is what we have in view here. But then also like rehabbing a house, right? It became a real estate term. I think it's most widely popularized as a standalone noun for addiction treatment facilities, rehab. She went to rehab. He went to rehab. Now, obviously, it means a place or a process between the hospital and home. That time after you're in the hospital where they can't medically do anything for you, where you need time and rehab, right, to recover some sort of lost ability. Was that fair to say? I mean, that's how I understand rehab here.
No, I think it's absolutely right. I do think it could have a connotation of, well, this person's addicted to drugs or alcohol and they're looking to get clean. I think in Senator McConnell's case, we do know some of his past physical ailments, right? He has had, falls in recent years. And I think there's been, again, this comes back to the lack of transparency from his office. There's speculation that he's had strokes. And so maybe we've seen some of that recently that have these neurological injuries that have led to physical injuries. So it wouldn't shock me at all. For someone as old as he is, to have an injury like that, to need time in a rehabilitation facility to learn the use of his faculties again. But again, this could all be alleviated with a press release saying, hey, this happened, we expect him to be out, or, God forbid, we don't think he can discharge his duties as a senator anymore. He's going to be stepping back. But instead, we've left with nothing.
Right. So, yes, thank you for those of you who are concerned and the things that you're sharing. For those of you not aware, the former Senate Majority Leader was hospitalized on June the 14th after now this is according to statements that have been released, he briefly lost consciousness and fell. But he did not break any bones or suffer a concussion. And so, again, we're left to wonder what did happen and certainly pray for not only his recovery, but I don't know. At some point, I'm praying for the realization that maybe your time of public service has come to an end and it is time for you to cede that position to someone who is able to do the work of the people fully, to fully engage in the work of the people. I want us to be people who recognize that there comes a time to pass the mantle, to, what you were called to do is done, and it's time to let someone else do the work before you. No individual is indispensable, I guess, is maybe part of my thought process here as well.
I think that's right, and especially in the context of elected officials and representing the public, I think the best thing and the legacy that Senator McConnell would hope to eventually leave is, serving his people for over 4 decades. And when it came time to, and maybe the time really isn't there yet, who knows, right? But when that time eventually does come to say, you know what, it's time, like you said, Carmen, to pass the mantle to the next generation of leaders from the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We can only hope that that's the attitude that eventually comes.
Yeah. For those of you wondering, he's 84. So there you go. All right. We're going to continue our conversation with Daniel Bennett here in just a moment. We're going to talk about primaries. There are some very extreme candidates who have run in primaries, who are running in primaries, some so progressive that Bernie Sanders won't endorse them. How progressive are you if Bernie Sanders won't endorse you? And then what does that mean, that our primaries tend to reward extreme candidates? Are they then electable? And if elected, Is that who we want? That's up next here on The Reconnect. Have you ever been to visit a new place, maybe even a new church, and you're like, who are these people? What are they all about? And what are all the various things that they're offering? Well, maybe you're feeling a little bit that way about what you've stumbled upon here at The Reconnect or at Faith Radio. Well, welcome, first of all. You're not here by accident. I totally trust that this is like a divine appointment that God has set, and I'm thrilled to be sharing in this time with you. But if you're new to The Reconnect or to Faith Radio, we would love to share a little bit more about who we are and all the other stuff that we're doing. You can request a welcome pack. It includes goodies and swag and information on ways that you can connect and grow in your faith. You can request your welcome pack right now. Text the word welcome to 877-933-2484. Again, text the word welcome to 877-933-2484. You can follow the link, or you can also request one at myfaithradio.com. In fact, I think of myfaithradio.com as kind of the one-stop point for all things Faith Radio. That's where you can connect not only to the show, but to previous episodes of the show via podcast. You can check out the other things that we're offering. You can not just get a welcome pack, but there's just any endless number of things that you can do at myfaithradio.com. In addition to requesting your welcome pack, just let me encourage you to just take a little tour, walk around, get to know us. And then in turn, we'd love to get to know you. Who's running in elections near you? How would you describe them? How would you describe those individuals? Is there anybody that is past the limit in one direction or another in terms of the bandwidth that you think is appropriate for elected service, in terms of somebody who would genuinely represent you? We're talking with Daniel Bennett. He's a professor of politics at John Brown University. Daniel, let's just talk about that. When we talk about a representative form of government, I want a person who's going to represent me. Now, I also recognize they have to represent everybody else. So talk with how our system works and how we end up with people who represent such a small, narrow band of the population.
Well, of course, in our system of elections, we have our general elections in November typically. But before that, we've got to choose candidates to represent the major parties. And those typically happen in the summer or even spring before the general election. And these are called primary elections. I know that your listeners are probably familiar with this. This has not always been how our system has worked in terms of us spending a lot of money and attention to candidates running for the primary nomination for their party. It really, at the presidential level, didn't really emerge until the 1970s, where all of a sudden voters had a say in what kinds of candidates were going to represent the major parties in the presidential elections. And then over time, as we've basically been asked as Republicans or Democrats to choose the person to represent those parties, not surprisingly, the way that candidates have distinguished themselves is to stake out increasingly more, not necessarily extreme, but certainly more partisan positions within that party. So if I'm running as a Republican, for example, and my entire platform is one of moderation, one of compromise with elected officials from across the political spectrum, that might appeal to the broader segment of the electorate as a whole. But in terms of the Republicans in my district who are going to be voting in the Republican primary, they might not be as interested in that. They might be more interested in my opponent in the Republican primary, who says, I'm going to be the best Republican you've ever seen. I'm going to take out these most extreme Republican positions on X, Y, and Z. That's going to appeal to more partisan members of the parties who tend to vote in primary elections in the first place. Now, not surprisingly, we've seen more and more extreme candidates affiliated with these parties win primary elections. And then when it comes to the general election, we're left with a choice of, well, gosh, where did all the moderation go? Where did all the compromisers go? And so, like I tell my students virtually every semester, if we don't like the candidates that are representing us in the general election, and then we don't like those people who are representing us in our legislatures and elsewhere, we really don't have anyone to blame but ourselves for giving us those choices in the first place.
Well, and when you ask a question like, where did all the compromisers go? There are people who are going to hear that question in multiple ways, because compromise somewhere along the way became a dirty word.
Well, in some ways, right? Because I remember my favorite example of this. This was maybe about 10 years ago. A Senate candidate was running somewhere in the Midwest, and he, made it part of his platform, which was very, very common for a time, to say, well, I'm going to reach across the aisle and work with members of the other party. And a journalist finally asked, well, what does that mean exactly to reach across the aisle? What does that look like for you? And he said, well, really what it means is to reach across the aisle and pull them to our side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And when we hear compromise, we say, yes, that's what I like. Other people coming to my side. Don't love the idea of watering down or getting rid of some of my ideas. But if we can convince people to come to my side, that's the compromise that we tend to like.
So I like the image of, in terms of our representative democracy, I like the image of there's a table and everybody is bringing their own chair, but everybody gets to come to the table. It's like a potluck. Nobody's setting the table. You just bring your own stuff and come to the table. And then we're going to commune together. We're going to work it out together. We're going to share what we brought with one another. We're going to taste and sample what others are thinking about and what they're feeling, and we're going to learn their story. And because we're all in this together. I mean, not everybody is ever going to be like me. It's just not going to happen. I am seeking to become more and more like Christ every day. So until the point in time when every person is pursuing that end, which we're not there yet. So I have this passion and calling as a Christian in the culture, but that is different than my passion and calling, maybe difference the wrong word, distinct from, I can identify a difference between my missional calling as a Christian in the world to live as a provisional demonstration of the kingdom of heaven in the midst of the kingdoms of this world, and still recognize I'm an ambassador to a foreign kingdom. America is not heaven. I get that. And so when we come to the table, we're not talking about the Lord's table. We're talking about the table of common fellowship as people who live in America.
And this is maybe the most important observation about the state of politics in the United States today and how people approach politics, whether they're Christians or non-Christians or whatever it might be. The process of politics that you just described, the sitting at the table together, the sorting things out, the ordering things well, the process of building something together, right? The deliberation that comes with our system of politics and government. That's a lot messier. It's a lot more amorphous than simply voting and making policies, et cetera. And I think too often we tend to put a lot of our focus, or the majority of our focus and attention, on results. What does party X accomplish? How do we keep party Y from accomplishing what they want to do, which we think is very problematic? And I'm not saying that elections shouldn't matter, that we shouldn't focus on victories and trying to keep those who we believe are mistaken from enacting bad policies, right? Restraining evil and wickedness, et cetera, right? But in the process of doing that, we lose a lot of what the process of politics ought to be, which is a lot slower and deliberative and conversational with people in our communities. And that's a big question. We're not sorting that out this year or this decade even. It's part of the American political experiment. But man, Carmen, you really did hit on something this morning.
Mm-hmm. All right. I want everybody to come to the table and bring I don't know, your cornbread salad, which I've never tasted because that's not a thing. But in fancy, in fancy farm, it might be. All right. Hey, Daniel, we got to leave it right there. Thank you so much for the conversation today. We so appreciate you. The first hour of the Reconnect is already evaporated. That seems impossible to believe, but it's true. We do have another hour up next. We're going to talk about your story. You ever wondered about somebody else's story? I wonder about your story. What's your story? Linda Mental will join us, as well as Paul Antleitner. We're going to talk about story. Thanks for listening to The Reconnect with Carmen LaBerge. Let us know how we can help you more fully reconnect the eternal with the everyday. We want to walk with you throughout your journey of discipleship, so let's connect. You can text us at 877-933-2484 or connect with us online at myfaithradio.com and on all our social media. I look forward to connecting with you as we each seek to reconnect the eternal with the everyday.